The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun, and thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's Friday, huh? How exciting is that? But not only is it Friday, it is Friday the 13th. And, we all have our beliefs of what that kind of day means. A lot of people don't forget the films. People think maybe it's a bad luck day. Maybe they think it's something else. Maybe, we had on Witch Jody on Tuesday, who said after the program, when she was on with me, she had said that this is that's actually a very lucky day. There's so many interpretations. There's so many things that go around it. And is that superstition? What is that? We have superstition in our lives every day. Maybe there are things that we do that we don't even realize, but we put a certain way because it makes us feel better, or we feel like it brings us better luck, or all sorts of things. And there's a lot to do. And there's one I just caught myself doing when the show started. And I'm gonna tell my guest about it when I bring her on. And I really wanted to talk about superstitions today, and I found absolutely the right person for that. We have on with us today author Dr. McElroy. Her name is Deborah McElroy. She authors as Dr. McElroy, and her book, Superstitions, a Handbook of Folklore, Myths, and Legends from Around the World. It's volume 5. That was released in 2020, and we're going to be talking about all sorts of superstition. And you know what I'd love to see people do is, if you want, put in the comments, what do you do that's superstitious that you need to do to be able to continue with your day, or continue, or if you're an actor, what do you do to get yourself ready to go on stage? Are there little rituals that you do that helps you get through everything? Because I think these are very interesting. And I do want to say, before I bring on Deborah, that, tonight we're going to be talking about this. And by no means is this meant to be, making light of superstition, because it is serious. It's serious to a lot of us. I'm a very superstitious person. And so I don't look at superstition as something that I laugh at, like, oh, look at what they do, because I do my own. And that's the approach we're going to take on it tonight. Deborah, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you very much for joining me. And a little bit of trivia here is all the years I've been doing this, I've never had someone on who just went by initials. And this week I've had 2 people that have gone by initials, as it happens, yesterday and today. C.L. Thomas was yesterday, and Dr. McElroy is today. And if I could even spell your name right, that's even a bigger bonus, isn't it?
That's an in-joke, people.
Not a very funny one either.
We got it. We got
it
cool.
figured out.
Yep.
Okay. So, when we started the live here on Facebook, so people listening on the radio, you're not going to necessarily appreciate this. Deborah, I don't know if you realize, but I switched on the camera where right next to me, it just says GhostBox Live. And it was originally to the left, and I switched it to the right because I always like to be my picture always on the top left. Okay. And I did that before I started the program. When I did that, I thought to myself, that's kind of superstitious in a way. That's a superstition that I created myself, or at least a ritual that I'm like, I need to do this because I feel better about the program. It will make absolutely no difference on the show. I hope not, at least, but it's still something I do.
I don't think it's a surprise that you feel better that way, Greg, because I mean, when you think about it, we learn to read left to right, right? And
True.
so if you put your picture and yourself at the very top left corner, then you're going to be the first thing that viewers see.
Which
So
is
you're giving yourself a little bit of a boost, a little bit maybe more power in being in that position. So it makes sense to me.
it's interesting, isn't it? And to your point that I've not thought about it that way, but I can't argue that point. So there to these things that we do, that there are this background to it, why we do it, and we may not even be privy to it yet. We're still doing it.
hmm In fact, a lot of the superstitions that we take for granted, we have no idea where they came from or why they evolved, and yet we continue to do them hundreds or thousands of years later. You and I spoke earlier about the one of opening an umbrella in the house.
Yeah.
And in my book, I mentioned that the umbrella as we know it was invented in Victorian times, and it had a very, very powerful spring attached to that opening mechanism. And since they were very large and the ribs were made of steel, they could do some serious damage, whether you're talking about shooting this thing open and it breaking things in the house, or whether, someone who's not expecting this giant thing open in the house suddenly runs into it, a little child or somebody else. So potentially, I mean, maybe it's far-fetched, but potentially it could injure somebody, right?
Yeah.
Or do damage.
Yeah.
So it becomes a taboo, if you will, or a superstition. Don't open this thing in the house. But we forget why after 100 years.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting. It actually starts off as a safety concern.
Exactly. And I think that's the case in a number of them. There are some where you talk about throw a coin in the fountain, right? And that'll bring you good luck. The history behind that one is really interesting because in ancient times, a lot of coins were made of copper. And copper acts as a fungicide and an antibacterial as it dissolves in water. And so as you start throwing more of these pieces of copper into these wells and into these fountains that people drink from, the water over time becomes purer. And so people associate that with good luck or good fortune because they don't get sick from it. Diseases aren't spread, that kind of thing, but they're not sure why, right? They don't understand necessarily the mechanism of the copper fungicide. We understand that now as modern interpretators, but the superstition has remained for 1,000 years.
I think it's really interesting how, and I don't know how the right way to say this, that we, as a society, as people, we go along for the ride. Like you said, we don't know why we do that, but we do it. We just take it. We just take it over time. One that has never taken off, a superstition that's never really taken off was throwing $100 bills at my house. That doesn't seem to work quite as well. And
maybe you need to be president or something for it to work.
You mean not a radio host?
Somebody with a little bit more authority, I think.
I was going to say certainly not a radio host then. And that's really interesting how these things kind of, and it is also that point too of like people don't know where certain things come from, but we take it. And and you did the research, you found out the reasons why, but so many of us, we just took it as if you will, gospel, not necessarily, but you know what I mean. And I mean, I think about my own parents. My mom was very superstitious, and it's really rubbed off on me, and it's even stuff like, and I know this isn't superstition, but the whole thing of like, my hand's itching, that means money's going to be coming in, that sort of thing, just the whole gambit of it, I guess.
Well, that particular superstition that you just mentioned has an interesting background also. In African traditions, the itchy palms was a sign that good fortune was coming your way. Well, good fortune over time became associated with receiving money, right? Nothing is more fortuitous than
Yeah.
getting money. And so itchy palm meant money is coming your way. Well, then the next step is if you make this motion, right? If you scratch your palm, that means pay me, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that's very common in our society. And of course, the word scratch is a slang term for money.
I was just gonna say, like, had a little scratch coming in or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they one just came from the other, and it's so interesting.
And how it evolves. They do evolve.
Mhm.
And going back to, I think we're talking about me switching my monitors and stuff around. Bruce had said also, which I think that there's something to this, but I do think for me it is more superstition. Sometimes comfort. There is comfort in a routine as well,
Mhm.
and I do understand that for certain. Um,
I think Greg or Bruce has a point, because I think the reason that we tend to take these things at face value and not be concerned about where they come from or why they came that way, we just do them, is because there is comfort in that ritual,
yeah.
and if you start to dissect it too much, sometimes maybe it loses that mystical quality of being comforting.
I I also wonder if it kinda comes down to what you and I had talked about earlier in the week, and that was that, it's like once you do that sort of ritual, we can then say we did everything we could to for whatever that situation was that ritual or superstition called for. It's like, well, I did what I was supposed to do.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I used the example of spilling the salt. If you spill the salt and you grab that bit and toss it, then you're like, "Whew, I dodged that bullet because if I hadn't have tossed that salt, then some evil thing would happen to me."
Right? It could still go pear shaped, but not because of me.
But I did my bit,
I did my
like you
bit.
said. I did
Yeah.
my part, and the rest is up to fate now.
So as we are on Friday the 13th, just the number 13 is always considered to be unlucky. Do you know why that is?
Well, it's very interesting. It's unlucky in certain cultures. In other cultures, it isn't. And the main reason that it's unlucky in Western culture is because of Christianity. The biggest part of the myth of the number 13 traces back to the biblical situation at the Last Supper. Christ and his 12 apostles were meeting for supper. Allegedly, Judas was the last to arrive, that making him the 13th person at the Last Supper.
Oh,
And he goes on, of course, to betray Christ and eventually kill himself for his sin. And that makes that number like the worst thing in the world. You can't get any worse than betraying Jesus Christ, right? I
right.
mean, that's like the ultimate terrible thing that a person in our society could ever imagine.
So, but
So,
yeah,
so that's why the number 13 has that shadow over it.
and that's why anything associated with him, pretty much, even the name itself.
Right. And of course, it's interesting that Friday was considered unlucky on its own long before it got teamed up with 13.
Okay.
So in the Bible, and I have read this research, but I cannot tell you where it comes from. Supposedly, Friday was the day that Adam and Eve ate the apple in the garden.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's a bad one. That's a bad one. That one sets up mankind for all kinds of trouble
we
going
we
down the
never
road.
rebounded from that, did
We
we?
have never come back from that, right? Friday was also the day that Jesus was crucified.
That's true.
And I don't understand also where we decided to call that Good Friday.
I was gonna say, yeah.
That's something in church dogma that has eluded me. But Friday is also supposedly the day that Cain killed Abel,
Wow,
and the day that Noah's Ark set sail. during the Great Flood, which is why, see, this leads to another superstition. This is why Fridays are supposed to be unlucky for sailing. Sailors don't want to set sail on a Friday because that was an unlucky day going all the way back to Noah.
And imagine everyone has a big craw over Mondays. I mean, little did they realize that Fridays being what
Friday's the worst day, man.
It really
Friday's
is
the day.
Well, it's also interesting too, and we're gonna take a break here in a second. But it's also interesting too, as we talked about Monday as well. You know, you said that Friday, you know, number 13 is unlucky in Western civilization, and of course, you know, up to so many, that's the only civilization. You know, and it's
right,
that,
of course,
and that is so narrow-minded. I understand when people don't know, because you know, I don't expect everyone to know the superstitions of the entire planet. But I mean, it just, everything in general just always goes to the Western civilization. It acts like it's the only civilization.
If it happens here, it happens everywhere in our minds, and obviously that's not the case.
Obviously not the case at all. Why don't we go ahead and do this? We're gonna go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we're gonna continue our conversation with Deborah McElroy. We're talking about superstitions. If you have questions about superstitions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, we're going to keep having a great conversation. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. Let's go on a paranormal investigation together. There is no better place to do that than a one-of-a-kind event we're holding at the haunted 300 Clifton Mansion in downtown Minneapolis, Monday, September 30th. This unique event starts with a quick 101 on how to use the equipment. Then we take a very special trolley tour, and unlike normal candlelight ghost tours, we stop at one of the locations on the tour and do a paranormal investigation right there. We return to the 300 Clifton Mansion and embark on a paranormal investigation throughout the beautiful 20,000 square foot home, exploring the large formal living rooms, secret passageways, and basements deep below, including areas not normally accessible to the public. The 101 and investigations are led by Char Savoy and myself. Tickets are limited. This event starts at 6:30 p.m. Monday, September 30th, with a couple of pricing options available, and tickets are available at 300clifton.com. Look for GhostBox Radio Candlelight Ghost Trolley Tours on the main page. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com. Gritty Gear Company is a great place to go for clothing that is fun and expressive, but did you know we also do custom orders on demand? We've worked with all types of companies and organizations, from first responders to even a certain radio station. Our team is here to help you look amazing. Our clothing is of the highest quality, and you will love your logo on the finished product. We are a locally owned small business who simply wants you to look great. Find out more at grittygearcompany.com.
We know you value buying local, especially when it comes to your magical supplies. So if you're looking for grimoires, decks, jewelry, candles, or herbs that are locally sourced, then come on down to Magus Books and Herbs. Curated for your ritual, ceremonial, spiritual, and spellwork needs, we've got all the tools to make your working extra. So make that prosperity ritual one that keeps on giving by visiting us at 1848 Central Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis, or visit us online at magusbooks.com.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
And I'm hoping that we could see you tomorrow, October 14th, for the Witchy Weekend on the St. Croix at the American Legion 491 in Bayport, Minnesota. Tomorrow's activities are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I myself will be speaking at 5 p.m. tomorrow. We're going to be talking and sharing some spirit recordings that I have taken and received over the years through Spirit Box and other things such as EVPs. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also Witch Jody, who we had on the program Tuesday. She's a sponsor of the program. She's going to be there. She's speaking tomorrow at 10 a.m., though I do believe that that is completely sold out. Nevertheless,
No.
for her, it's sold out. But she's
Bye.
going to be there all day. So come on by, stop by, say hi to us.
Now
You can
stop
go
it.
to Eventbrite to get
Stop.
tickets, Witchy Weekend on St. Croix.
No.
But you can also just show up, just like the old days before the internet. Just show up, and it'd be great to see you. If you come out there, stop by, say hi. I'd love to see you. It'd be great to be able to connect. And that's tomorrow, Witchy Weekend on the St. Croix. Really excited about that. We are talking superstitions. It is Friday the 13th. Seems like a perfect opportunity to do so. I have the absolute pleasure of having on Deborah McElroy. She writes under the name D.R. McElroy, and her book, Superstitions, a Handbook of Folklore, Myths, and Legends from Around the World. This is volume 5. Oh my gosh, volume 5. Deborah, how many? Who knew, right? That you could get 5 volumes of Superstitions.
Well, this book is part of a series that covers a lot of different topics. Witchcraft is one of them, and love and that kind of thing is one of them. But I am working on a new volume for this particular book on superstitions alone, and that should be published sometime next year. And I think it'll be fun because in the first one, there wasn't room for as many superstitions as I hoped. And the readers have been clamoring for a lot more superstitions. So this next one's going to be just superstitions and nothing else. So,
I mean, how do you find, how are you able to research this stuff? I mean, because you don't, just in our first segment, you don't just kind of know the stuff, you know the stuff very well. How are you researching this stuff? And especially the stuff that's outside of, dare I say it, Western civilization?
Well, I started with what I know, which is, of course, the cardinal rule of writing, write what you know. And then I did the research on that. For example, the Friday the 13th and the number 13 and those kind of things. And then I kind of worked my way backwards into more obscure, what do I want to say? Not ones that are regional, ones that are only in particular cultural groups is what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
And is what led me to different books, different websites, different sources that were able to say, okay, this isn't in Western culture. Here are some of the things you probably don't know. And it's just fascinating, some of them.
It truly is. Bruce has put into the comments, and feel free to put your comments in, folks, if you'd like to. Bruce is wondering, is there anything behind the superstition of wearing certain colors or clothing for sporting events?
Actually, yes. If you can go back in antiquity, we're talking probably the Greeks, so several thousand years, to them, color was a very important thing. In fact, only emperors could wear the color purple. You've probably heard about the royal purple,
Yeah.
and that was strictly limited to those highest ranking nobles in Greek society. That tradition kind of carried over into European traditions. The royal purple could only be worn by kings and queens. And then eventually, as a purple dye became easier to come by, the wealthy started doing it. And once the wealthy start doing it, then it kind of trickles down to the rest of us mere mortals. And so I think when you're talking about something like wearing the team colors, it's an extension of that. It's like we'll support them by showing we're on their side by wearing their color, right? And
Yeah.
so they look up in the stands and they say, hey, there's more blue on than there is green, then our team's better. It's an oversimplification, but I think that's what it boils down to.
At least back in the time of the Roman emperors, did they believe that the color gave them power?
Yes, and because it was incredibly rare and incredibly expensive. And so, you had to, I don't know if you don't even want to know how the color purple is made because that's disgusting. But suffice it to say that it takes lots and lots and lots of little animals.
Oh, no.
Yes. And because it took so many and it was so labor intensive, it made it rare and expensive. And if it's rare and expensive, then, only the richest and the most high esteemed are the ones that want to wear it, right?
Right. Well, I'm sure Nero is probably rolling in his grave right now, seeing that the Minnesota Vikings wear purple and that they have no power whatsoever. So,
and the Phoenix Suns, right?
So yeah, Heather asked the question: what is the most superstitious culture?
Oh, Heather, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Great question.
Yes, it turns out, based on my research, that one of the most superstitious cultures is Nairobian people.
Okay.
They have so many interesting superstitions. And one of the things that I figured out, part of it is what you and I talked about, Greg, was that by having these rituals, you get some control. Then the people of that particular country, did I get it right? Is Nairobi a country?
I think so.
I think so. I confess I'm really bad at African geography.
Well,
so,
and you and I together.
Yeah. I think it's a country and not a city, but the people, there are a lot of them packed into a small area.
It's the capital of Kenya.
Oh, I was wrong.
I'm right. I'm wrong. Right with you. So.
All right. Let me look. It's in my book. Let me look. So anyway, the people in that country are very packed in tightly. The population is close to 2/3 of what the United States is in an area that is only a little bit larger than the state of Texas.
Got it.
So yes, so because there are so many of them, they can feel like they don't have the kind of personal space or control over their environment. And so that tends to make people want to have a lot of rituals that gives them more of a sense of control, right? So by doing Nigeria, I apologize to Nigerians everywhere. The country is Nigeria.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. By doing that, they give themselves a sense of control over their environment. And so they have come up with a lot of superstitious rituals for a lot of different things. Some of them involve pregnancy. For example, one of them is don't whistle when you're drawing water at night, right? If you think about it, well, that makes sense, right? If I'm out in a undeveloped area and there are wild animals around, the last thing I want to do is draw attention to myself. while I'm out there at night, right?
Right.
So there's also variations on that. For example, pregnant women shouldn't go out during the day because the daytime spirit can hurt their baby. Well, pregnant women are vulnerable whether it's night or day, right?
Right.
So by putting this restriction on them, they can say, okay, we're keeping them safe from evil spirits, or whether we may be keeping them safe from crocodiles or lions instead, the truth is they're giving themselves control again.
And I think that brings up a really interesting point that I've never thought of before, is the idea of like, well, especially if some of these cases, we don't know where these superstitions come from. And we talk about control, and I'm thinking of control in terms of my own control, like I'm in control of my own situation doing this. But people who are creating something that eventually becomes a superstition so that they can control other people, like the pregnant women, that's kind of controlling whatever they're doing and wherever they go for whatever reason. I don't know. Do you see any more of that in your research?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we only have to look at the Catholic Church, and I'm a member myself, so don't write me hate mail.
Right, exactly. Me
But to talk about how the patriarchy has controlled and demoralized, if you will, women. Women had to cover their heads in mass for 1,000 years, and the reason allegedly was because demons could spontaneously sprout out the tops of our heads. And so we had to keep these things covered so, none of the men got contaminated by a woman's demons as they were shooting out of her skull, and there's just a lot of stuff like that in the church that are specifically strictures against women. A priest can't marry. Why? Because women carry original sin, and you don't want them to be contaminated by contact with a woman, right?
Original sin that went back to Friday. So we now
have seems to me there was a man there on that day too, but
unbelievable.
I know, right?
Yeah. So, and the other part of it too, because I think it's a balance. And one of the things that you and I had talked about that we really wanted to strike the right balance is that, superstition isn't meant to be something to be mocked at, made fun of. It is very serious, but is there a line though, where it's just like, it's very clear that this is something that is above and beyond reasonable, use, I guess?
Well, when you're talking about use and when you're talking about what's reasonable and putting that in a magical context, it's kind of hard to say, okay, this line is okay, but this one's too far, right?
Yeah.
There's Hindu superstitions that say cow dung is a great sanitizer, and if you cover your floors and walls with it, you'll be healthy. Okay, well, cows are sacred in Hindu religion. So you can extrapolate from that may have been where that came from in a time before modern sanitation, right?
Absolutely.
So is that too far of a line in today's world? Maybe, but 200 years ago, maybe not. So I think that there is no hard and fast line.
Yeah.
I will chuckle at some things that people in other cultures or in my own culture do, but that doesn't mean I am in any way degrading or denigrating that person or that belief. It's kind of my way of saying, oh, that's your belief. Okay, you should see some of mine because mine are interesting too. I'm one of those don't step on a crack people. So I'm like dancing down the sidewalk trying to miss all these silly cracks, even though, bless her heart, my mom's been gone for 30 years, right?
Yep.
So I wouldn't be breaking her back anyway, but I still carry that with me.
Absolutely.
So I'm as superstitious as the next person. I just find it more than anything, I find it interesting what it says to us about people, about humans, and our need to control in whatever manner we can, whether it's tiny things like throwing salt, or whether it's big things like creating an entire religion around a mythology, if you will, that excludes a part of the population, you know?
Well, and two, I mean, it's very possible that people in like India are not using cow dung for sanitational purposes, but I still could imagine that there's a part of the population, if they tell you what it was and you laugh at it and chuckle at it, they're going to be offended still, because the cow is still very much lauded as a perfect creature. That you got to be careful in those situations as well.
Of course.
Anywhere you go, right? I mean,
of course, yeah.
And that's, I think, and I'm not downing our own civilization, but the Western civilization, I mean, it does always kind of, in my mind, come back to that, where we think that everyone thinks the way we do. So why would we ever want to even consider the cow of that sort of, hierarchy? But that's just here. That's not the rest of the world viewpoint.
Right. Well, and let's be honest, the Western world, if you will, and I'm using that term broadly, has been the most dominant on the planet for a couple of thousand years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right or wrong, that we tend to think that we run the world. Right? I mean, it's obviously not true. There's 2/3 of the world that we don't have anything to do with, but we are egocentric by nature. Humanity is egocentric by nature.
Yeah.
Every little child knows that the world revolves around her, and that's all. So I think that in this particular space and time, we are doing a lot more than we have historically to try and consider other cultures and other areas that are not our own.
Okay.
And I think that's a good thing. I think that's to our benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And it's good to see that we can open our eyes a little bit more to things. And I mean, it sounds like a stupid question, but I mean, clearly, like the internet has played a big part in that too. And I think youth and the internet, if I may, play a part in that, because I think people younger than myself, they're the ones who I'm interested in all this too. But I think younger people get really interested in it, and they actually do something about it.
I agree with you. The United States, particularly, and obviously I'm more familiar with us than I am with other nations, but the United States has historically been youth-centered, right? So that makes it easier for new ideas to move through our society and take over than it would in other societies sometimes. So yes, the internet and the youth culture has definitely changed even my generation. I'm a boomer. You're probably Gen X.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that my generation is still standing on the curb watching these cars go by, essentially going, what has happened? We used to rule. But things are changing. And I think a lot of us are grabbing that change. We're welcoming it and saying, hey, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and do this? Let's go ahead, take our next break. When we come back, we're going to finish our conversation with Deborah. We have so much to talk about. I see some stuff in the comments. We'll get to that as well. And we'll just finish up this week. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950.
Welcome to the night where the paranormal unite. A party like never before under the moon's airy light. The vibe is dark, the air is cold, spirits taking flight. Get haunted and ghost and magazine leading the fright. Ghosts and ghouls dancing hand in hand. Lost souls roaming the haunted land. On the battleship New Jersey we gather with glee. Horror and paranormal, a sight to see.
Twin Cities Con returns to the Minneapolis Convention Center for their 4th year, November 8th through 10th. Twin Cities Con is a celebration of comics, toys, TV, film, art, cosplay, games, and all things nerdy. It's also a family-friendly event where you can meet your favorite celebrities, browse the vendor hall and artist alley for the coolest merch, watch celebrity Q&A, and even more. Twin Cities Con is bigger and better than ever before, with guests like Anakin Skywalker himself, Hayden Christensen, Stephanie Beatrice from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Encanto, WWE Hall of Fame wrestler Sting, and Lou Diamond Phillips. Plus, your favorite voice actors. 3 days of action-packed fun in the heart of Minneapolis at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Tickets start at $25. Kids tickets are just $8 for the entire weekend. VIP tickets also available, including some really cool VIP perks. Don't wait to get your tickets because early bird pricing is for a limited time. Buy your tickets and get more information at TwinCitiesCon.com. Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. And don't forget to join us Monday, October 19th on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to have on Jill Shelley. She's the owner of the Boyd House. I hope you've been hearing the commercials that we've been putting out there. It's a fantastic location in Boyd, Minnesota. We are going to have her on. We're going to talk about the history of this house. We're going to be talking about why it's so haunted and what's been going on there. What have people been picking up while they're there? It's going to be a fantastic, eye-opening experience talking about this location. I hope you're able to join us for that. We are having a great conversation with Deborah McElroy. She is she writes under the name D.R. McElroy, Superstitions, a Handbook of Folklore, Myths, and Legends from Around the World. This is available on Amazon. Deborah, is this a great place to get the book? Is on Amazon?
It is. It was in Barnes & Noble for the first couple years after it came out. I don't know how many will have it now, although they can always order it at your local Barnes if you'd rather. The Kindle copy of the book is a pretty good edition, and you can also get the hardcover there. But I'm a little biased. I think the hardcover is the way to go because they did such a beautiful job in printing that, and the cover's embossed, and it's really just quite remarkable. And it's only like $10, I think, between $10 or $14. So
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It is beautiful. And if I may dare say so, if hopefully you're okay with this, we have on our website ghostboxradio.com. We have a site within the site called GhostBox Book Club. And we have your book listed. It's the Amazon link, but if you buy it through us, we get a little kickback from it. And I do mean little, but
I think that's great. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, we all the authors that we have on, we put all their books on the page because sometimes people are like, I don't remember who we listened to, and they can go there and check it out. So it's pretty cool. Now I have a bunch of stuff in the comments, or that's also known as comments, that I'd like to talk through here real fast.
Okay.
There's a couple conversations actually going on here. We're not going to go into the conversations, but Andrew says seeing superstitions and careers is interesting and eye-opening. Most people don't know this, but fighter and bomber air crews listen to specific artists that associated music and wear their cologne or sprays during fighter and bomber runs.
I did not know that. My father was career Air Force, and I do know that most military people are quite superstitious, as are most police officers, most firefighters, and professional athletes. These are people that, in no small part, depend on what they can do physically. And so I think that superstition is another way of ritualizing and controlling how they can gauge their performance. I think
Yeah.
by wearing the same sock every week, you're gonna win your football game over and over, or something to that effect.
Absolutely. Heather says, speaking of careers and stuff, she says that healthcare workers are crazy superstitious. Don't say quiet or calm. Then you have the full moon effect too.
Actually, yes. And Heather, I did research on that full moon effect, and it's real. Apparently, the trips to the emergency room go way up, and those trips often involve a lot more bodily harm than your average trip to the emergency room does. So I guess it's a real thing. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like that Heather had worked in level 1 ER doing registration, and that's some of the stuff that she's seen.
I
Quite,
bet.
yeah. I couldn't imagine. Honestly, honestly, I just my praise goes out to all these people who do jobs that so many of us couldn't even begin to fathom how to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, Bruce, trying to get us back on topic here, as always, I really appreciate it. It's a good question. We've been chatting about superstitions that essentially live on. Any superstitions that have completely died out?
That's a great question, Bruce. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of one. As Greg was saying earlier, we kind of take these things as lore and we just keep doing them, even though we don't know why. And even though in many cases, the need for it or the reason for it is lost in antiquity, we still keep doing it. I'm sure there probably have been superstitions / rituals that people used to do that, because they've died out, I didn't find them anywhere. But if anybody knows, please go ahead and make a comment or jump in and say so. But I don't know of any, Bruce, that have gone the way yet. Most of them are hanging around.
It's interesting because I'm sure there has been superstitions that have maybe almost died out at some point and then started a resurgence. I don't know what they are, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to hear of something like that, I guess.
Well, some of them are starting to work their way toward extinction, I think. And a lot of them that have to do with like health or cleanliness, because things have changed so much. When I talked about copper in the water saving so many lives, that's kind of become irrelevant in most of the world, not all of it, but
Yeah.
most of the world. We have, clean drinking water. And so the kinds of things that are attached to healthful practices, I think, are beginning to die out.
Yeah.
In India, there was a practice where you would string a lemon and 7 chilies on a string, and you would hang that, and it was supposed to purify and bring good luck. Well, the basis for that turned out that the citrus and the vitamin C in the lemon would run up the string. As the juice ran up the string, it would pull the vitamin C with it, and then that would be released into the air. And between the actual life affirming value of vitamin C, in addition to the smell of citrus, that would repel a lot of insect life and less desirables. I know a lot of cats don't like citrus, so maybe cats are undesirable in some places. But Egypt wouldn't say that. Egypt, of course, revered the cat.
Absolutely.
And rightly so, since it kept them from starving to death.
Yeah. Now, Andrew had something here, which I actually think I wonder if it's actually the other way. But I mean, Andrew, your guess is as good as mine, unless you're not talking to guess. You know something I don't know. He says that he's pretty sure that there are Native American superstitions that have gone away as many of the lifestyles have changed over the years. And I'm assuming you mean forcibly, and their way of life have changed. And I also wonder if somehow those might be reasons why you hang on to those superstitions as well, because we talk about control and comfort in a sense, comfort being that it's familiar. It makes me wonder if that actually keeps them going a little bit. But we do a show on AM 950 Native Roots Radio with Robert Pilot, and I should ask him if he is aware of anything like that, because it's a really good question. What are your thoughts, Deborah?
Based on what I have seen in the last couple of years, and as we become more woke, I'm going to use that term for just because, as we've become more aware, if you will, I have seen a resurgence in interest in Native American culture among Native Americans. Now, there's always been, at least in the last 100 years or so, an interest in Native American culture among white Americans, a lot of whom like to claim or thoroughly believe that they have Native blood, although the fact is most of them do not. But it has been very recently that more young Native Americans are becoming interested in their own culture after having had it torn from them, obviously, for millennia. And so I'm really thrilled to see that. And I have seen television shows and movies and things that involve this. And you see a resurgence in what was typically Native American superstition, if you will, or Native American lore. Skinwalkers is one of them that comes to mind immediately. The Navajo tradition, and that has appeared in television and in movies, as well as books, novels that has appeared and been popularized.
And Wendigo would be another one.
Yes. Yes. And that, I think, is Ojibwa, if I'm correct.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, we have about 4 minutes left. So I don't know if we can answer this in the short amount of time, but we're talking about two histories here. We're talking about biblical history versus scientific history here. We talked a little bit about like when really the first superstition began with Eve on a Friday, apparently. What about the other side of it? The history that is actually calendar based and scientifically based. What is the oldest superstition? That's necessarily to know what it is, but how far back are we talking that we know of one?
Are you talking about when have we ritualized or institutionalized the first superstitions?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, you can go back a long way. I mean, some of the things that we think are really modern, like a prohibition against black cats, for example, go back into antiquity. Norse mythology has a goddess named Freya, who is often confused with the goddess Frigga, but Freya was a goddess of war and fertility, and she allegedly had a chariot that was drawn by two black cats. Now, since she is a goddess of war, one would think that having black cats around wouldn't necessarily be the best thing. That could certainly be a potential source for a prohibition against black cats. But we know that cats of any color were sacred in Egypt. And we know that cats did become associated in the Middle Ages with witches. So if you go back all the way to ancient Egypt, you're talking 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years that something has been sacred, and it has only been verboten for 500 years. So that to me, that's really fascinating.
That's really something. And just the idea of, where this stuff comes from, especially, the black cat part of it is something that, and I always get upset about that, quite frankly, because I've had a black cat who is just the sweetest little thing in the world. And it's sometimes these superstitions are pretty unfair, aren't they?
They are, and it's true that black cats are adopted less frequently at the Humane Society than cats of other colors. It does happen to be true. So if you're looking for a rescue, please adopt a black cat. You'll love her.
You'll love her forever.
That's right.
I certainly did too. The book is called Superstitions, a Handbook of Folklore, Myths, and Legends from Around the World, written by D.R. McElroy. That is the name that Deborah authors as. You can get it on Amazon. If you're able to, please consider even going to ghostboxradio.com, go to GhostBox Book Club on the site, and if you order through Amazon through us, we get a little something back if you wouldn't mind doing so. But either way, get the book because this is pretty cool. Deborah, we got to get you back on. We can talk about cryptozoology next time. How does that sound?
That sounds fabulous, Greg. I've got so much material.
I mean, and I'm talking like in a couple weeks. Like we'll talk about it.
We'll talk. Yeah,
absolutely. This was fantastic. Thank you so very much, Deborah.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Greg.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
And as we end the week here, I just wanted to remind everybody that once again, we are doing Witchy Weekend on the St. Croix. That's tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the American Legion 491 in Bayport, Minnesota. Everybody have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you Monday. We're talking with Jill Shelley of the Boyd House.